Great. Thank you. We will call to order tonight's meeting of the Budget Committee, February 5th. This is a follow-up and an update on the school district budget meeting, as well as preparation for our public hearing. But before we kick off, can I get somebody to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Volunteer? Ken? All right. Oh, thanks.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
And justice for all. Thank you very much. Nope. I know, I'm usually gonna. Thank you. All right. So first up is approval of the public meeting minutes from January 15th, which was our last meeting. Any comments or edits to the minutes?
One minor one.
Sure, Don.
On the second page, third of the way down, just before the box. There's a sentence says for $600,000, the increase will be $1,000. Was really intended to say that the increase would be $33 for a $600,000 property and $66 for a $633 for a 300. It was combining two different things. It was looking at the total taxes that one would pay if you had a 600 versus what the increase was.
Okay, can you repeat just for me the page that was on?
Yep, second page,
Second page.
all the way down the page.
Got it.
Could you just repeat what should be there?
I'll give you a copy of it.
Okay, that would be great.
I don't mind repeating if you like it. It looks like there for 600,000, the increase of the tax rate is $1,000. It really isn't 1,000, it's $66.
Okay, yes, on the last bullet.
Correct.
Yeah. All right,
I have another issue,
okay.
another change on the bottom of,
Just for you,
Oh, yeah.
one other just comment. Norm Gupel asked why the increase for the bookkeeper was, more than double. And the answer to that is, the new person that took over the job looked at the requirements, knowing that there's going to be more requirements, and just said, I can't do it for that. She did it for that originally. Again, we had a person who's been there for 10, 12 years. So the new person just, required more dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, did you?
yeah, on the bottom of page 11. Under the budget committee discussion section. On the fourth line in that paragraph, he noted that the 0.5% increase in the tax rate feels burdensome. It was 8.5.
Okay,
0.5.
in your comments from 0.5 to 8.5. Okay.
Right.
Do you have those noted down, Neil?
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
To accept the minutes as amended.
Thanks.
Okay.
Anyone-
I had
Okay.
also a very minor change.
Okay,
On page 6, the 1, 2, 3, the third bullet says currently the proposed fund balance use was 350,000, is now 360,000. Those two numbers should be switched.
okay, the proposed fund balance, 350 is now 360 and then switch.
Correct.
Okay,
With that, I'll second Steve's motion.
all in favor of accepting the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Thank you. All right, and that takes us to our update on the school district budget.
Okay,
Mr. Nato,
I'm gonna go to the table, or do you want me to stay here?
I think that's up to you. If you want to stay here, that's fine with me.
All right, I think I'm gonna go over there. It's easy to talk.
All right.
That's why I surrendered that seat.
Sorry.
Okay.
So I think I'm just gonna start with the warrants. And then, when we left here the last time, the temperature seemed to be looking to reduce the overall all-in by 250,000 as a high, and then there was down to 100 and then things in between. And there was also some discussion about where that should be. And I think, Rich, you made the point. I like that shirt, Rich.
I believe in Sasquatch.
Yeah, it's nice. That some of that should come from the operating budget. So when we went back and had our finance committee meeting, we took all of that information to heart. We also thought about not only the comments of the budget committee, but what we've been hearing from the community as well. So the all-in change that you're going to see across the warrants is for a reduction of 358,104, which is clearly higher than the 250,000 that was brought in. So I'll just kind of walk through where the changes took place and what was the rationale behind those. So the first one is in the operating budget itself, which was reduced by $134,104. And if you recall from the presentation, that was the amount that was requested for the 2 additional IAs that we need at Harold Martin School, something that's predicated by IEPs that have been written during the course of this year. In our discussion, we have 3 currently funded but unfilled positions for IAs, but in other places. So that was why are we asking for 2 more if we have those 3 that are currently we're not able to fill? The reality is we still need those 3. We just can't find people to fill them, and we need these 2 additional ones. In the course of the last few weeks, the major change was we now know that another person is going to be not taking retirement, they are going to be retiring. So to be clear, there's a difference between requesting early retirement, in which there's an incentive, and just choosing to retire. So this person has chosen to retire. We now know that, which changes our funding needs somewhat. And there's also some consolidation because of that retirement, that there's going to be some positions moving within the special ed department. And between that retirement and that consolidation, we don't feel there's a need for that $134,000. We can do it with the same amount of money that we have in the operating budget. So things will be shifting somewhat, but that money could come off the boards and we can pay for it through those two mechanisms. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions on that piece.
Is there anybody on the budget committee that did not see the school board meeting as far as this discussion?
I didn't.
I read the minutes, but
So you're still anticipating if the labor force becomes available, hiring those 2 positions, just some things have changed around in the budget, the retirement and other things like that.
Correct.
That would make that possible.
Exactly.
Oh.
So essentially, budget reduction, no service, no reduction in the educational sort of offering.
Correct. Yes. Anybody else? Okay, so that's the operating budget, which brings us down to what is on the warrant, which I think is in your drive of 27,491,895, which represents an increase of 2.29%. And Ken, to your previous question about the change in the tax rate, so that's an increase in the tax rate of $1.16, which would bring the local amount to be raised from $14.55 to $15.71 for 7.97%. if you want to think about it in those terms.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
1561,
I'm sorry,
1561.
1561. Oh, okay. And it's a little bit less.
Saved you a dime.
Thank you. But that percentage just went down. Nevertheless.
What was that last percent that you said?
I had 7.97%,
Okay, but maybe it's lower than
maybe a
that.
smidgen lower. On the other warrants, there was a lot of discussion on, I'll do the CIP one first, because that's probably where the most discussion was. Our initial request was for $425,000, which we still feel, and there's been some input from the town CIP committee as well as to what that number should be. But we still feel that that's the rational, logical number to fulfill our CIP over the next 10 years. But there was also the notion of, this has been a progressive movement, right? We asked for so much money for CIP last year. We took a lot of that from fund balance. We're adding to that so that we can get to that 425 number next year, but have a less immediate impact on the tax rate. So the request is for 350,000, not 425. So there's another reduction of $75,000. And again, the progressive piece is what's important, because if we can slow it down a little bit, I know $75,000 is not a lot, but everything that we can do is something. The special ed trust was probably the one that, upon rethinking, was, baby steps were more appropriate and sort of a progressive move. So we initially had asked for $225,000. Again, that was rational and logical based upon that we withdrew 240. However, when you take that much money from a trust that's only really been tapped into once in the last 10 years, the other part of you says, hopefully this is an anomaly and we're not going to have to do that again. So let's build that back up over time instead of in one fell swoop. So the reduction there was 125 and the new warrant reads $100,000. Any question? I should have stopped on the questions on the CIP. Any question on either one of those two?
On the CIP, it looks like the increase is marked as 200,000, but looks the same year over year.
So this is the discussion that we had previously, because we used $150,000 from taxation the last time around. The actual tax increase is only 200,000. I shouldn't say only, is $200,000.
Krista, do you want to walk us through that?
No. I don't want to pass. Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot about that.
And I think that, it's, I like the way that Laura has redesigned this, where you see the increase, you see the tax rate increase, and then the revenue changes, et cetera. So it gives us a little bit more information in those columns as we move across. Any other questions on CIP?
I just kind of want to reiterate something you said the other night at the school board meeting, which is that using this, just say $300,000, once you're already raising that, the next year, if you go to 425 or 450, whatever the number is, you're not increasing it by $450,000. You're only increasing it by the 125 or the $150,000 to get the CIP to where everybody agrees. Actually, I heard some discussion that it was even underfunded at that number, but that's probably the best that we can do at the time.
Yeah, and there's, the CIP is obviously, as we have said many times, that living document. And, another example of it being a living document is our hot water heater at the middle high school has decided not to function as it should. So there's $37,000 that we'll be looking to deal with in the coming weeks. It's sort of held together with duct tape and some kind of MacGyverish thing right now. The next warrant would be the tech trust, which was for $30,000. And we're still seeking to raise and appropriate that amount, but we feel strongly that we can do $15,000 of that from fund balance and then $15,000 through taxation. So that's a slight reduction in the taxation piece from 30 to 15. Then our vehicle trust, and yes, our vehicle discussion ended last night. Our version of the green bag came to an end. We are withdrawing money from the vehicle trust to purchase a new used van at some point here in the near future. So we are asking for, or we will be asking to raise and appropriate $10,000, but we also feel that we can be able to do that from fund balance. So no tax impact there. And gradually build that back up. The little minibus that we have is relatively new, 2 or 3 years. So we feel like we've got a little bit of time to get that back to where it needs to be.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah.
Questions or comments from the board?
I appreciate the bottom part that helps you understand the tax
Yes.
impact based on how much your house is assessed at. Thank you, Laura.
He's listening.
Because of us.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for all the continuing ways that the finance committee worked to get this down the way that you did. It was
So, I mentioned at the beginning, I'm changing my hats. I'm no longer representing the school board, but just speaking for myself as a school board member and as a community member. Evaluation piece, forefront of many of our minds. And I got really curious about who took it on the chin the hardest during that. And I have to thank Neil. I asked him to send me the spreadsheet resorted so that I could see it by percentage change. So it went top to bottom in that direction. And I looked at properties that had gone up. I went into the 150 percentile and above. So essentially your taxes almost doubled. And I believe there were 127 properties that fell in that category. And they skewed off, like, some people went up 500%, but that was the tail end. But what was interesting was of that 127 properties, 61 of them fell in our mobile home communities, which struck me as, rather odd in many ways. We've heard some people come and talk about the difficulties they've had. And while this isn't going to do enough for those folks, again, something you think about, how can we curtail, slow the pace? And maybe, this is not a budget committee talk. I'll bring it up at select board about evaluation process and how it could be skewed that much in one area, but it does raise the question. Not to say that anybody didn't do their job or do it properly, but it just seems odd.
Starter homes in Hopkinton are worth. That was the category that went up the most, just like 5 years ago. It was small commercial buildings and lakefront or pondfront properties.
Yeah.
And that is the market.
Yeah. So, when you're thinking about why did we go above the number, part of it was not only the response from this committee, but also thinking about other things that were going on in the community. And,
I also want to echo, sorry, I'm just going to pile on. I think that the discussion in our last meeting, like with the board, obviously, I think somebody made a comment, there was like agony. It was you, Rob, on the fate. You don't all have to look so glum. But obviously this committee took the decision of how to go back to the board pretty seriously and weighty. And I wanted to thank you, the board, the superintendent and the staff for taking that request at face value and doing it in a thoughtful and very responsive manner for the town and community. So thank you for that. I feel like it was a well-received request and I really appreciate that the board dug into it.
thank you.
So Rob, the actual decrease for the operating budget itself was the $134.
$134,104.
with a total reduction of, including everything of 358, if I have that right.
Correct.
Okay.
All the warrants together, looking at my pages, would be 358,100.
I just want to bring up something that two different people asked me about the last couple of weeks. Which, and it sort of ties back to the IA, but not really, but as far as staffing, when we went to school, granted, that goes back 10 years or so. Um, 9. I stand corrected. We had, I guess, I don't know if you'd call them den mothers, but we actually had people that came into the classroom that would help the teachers. I understand nowadays that there's a lot more, issues with security and all of that, but I think we have 3 school board members in the room. That just something that I wanted to pass along is something that was brought up to me, is that program still in place? And if it's not, is it something that's even feasible now? And would it help in the younger grades to have that kind of program? But I just want to pass that along because it was asked by me of 2 people.
I don't know specifically. I can tell you that, there are still volunteers in our school. People tend to volunteer more at the elementary schools than at the middle high school. We have had folks that, when I was there, that did a lot of volunteering, but the professional capacity and the day in, day out needs is,
Understood.
Rob, just a question for myself on the revenues. We did the 500,000 this year, correct? Versus, I think we did about 950,000 last year on revenue to help put towards the taxes.
So last year it was 400,000, and then there was some fund balance used to support some of the warrants. So it's very similar, but now the tact is different, less coming from fund balance. And at the end of the year, we actually, as you recall, we ended up drawing the money that we thought we were going to use from Article 10 contingency fund. I correct myself. We're retraining. What came from fund balance. So
Okay.
that's why the contingency fund remained at that $800,000 mark.
And how many cents per thousand is the fund balance plus the Article 10?
That would be about 35 cents, 7 times 5, if my math is correct. Anything else?
Thank you.
Can I go back to my seat?
The discussion of the extra 100 that you decided on last night, where does that fit? Have I missed that? You talking about it?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit last night. We talked about it a lot during our finance committee meeting. So our current fund balance is at about $223,000. That's where we're sitting right now in terms of a projection. We feel that will rise as it normally does towards the end of the years, and things that, we have to encumber for professional development and other things come into a clearer picture. But we are also still staring that $400,000 upside down on special ed, even with taking the money out of the trust. So we feel that that's a very safe, conservative number. If at the end of the year that fund balance is higher, then of course the board could at that time act to do a variety of things. It could take that fund balance and move it into the contingency fund. It could take some of that fund balance and use it to reduce taxation. It could use that fund balance to chip away at things in the CIP. So we'll have those options, but to lock ourselves in at this point in a year that's been quite difficult in the special ed realm, we didn't feel was very responsible.
That was a change from last night's vote to use that 100,000 to reduce this current?
No, it's the same as last night's vote.
Pardon?
I guess I don't understand where your question came from.
Well,
I thought your question was, how did we land on the 100,000?
No, not how you landed. The fact that you landed on it and it was put as a deduction to this year's numbers, which makes it up to 438,000 as my way of adding that up. Is that not true? You have,
Oh, are you saying, okay, so you're taking the 348 and you're using the fund balance to say that's a further reduction?
correct,
But it's not a reduction in the operating expense, it's an increase in the revenue. So you can't subtract it from
correct,
the expense side. You have to add it to the revenue side.
correct.
But it's the same, I understand it's the outcome, it gets you to the same point,
Get you
but
down at the bottom line of still the $1.16.
correct.
Okay. Talking apples, maybe and
I know.
oranges here, but yeah, the way you're presenting it is not the way that I understood it when I left that meeting and have, developed the document that
Okay,
we're gonna look
yeah,
at later.
So Rob, I think there was a request at the last meeting to spend a little bit more time on the contracts. Are you comfortable?
Yeah.
Talking to those?
Yeah.
For a
Do
bit?
you have questions or do you want to walk through the overview? What would you like to do?
I think it'd be helpful to just quickly go over the overview and then we'll do questions. And then I was thinking, I'm gonna shift the agenda order just very slightly because what I think I would like to do is we'll talk about contracts, take questions for the committee, then we'll open it to general public comment. Then we'll do final discussion on the school budget and vote, if that's agreeable to folks. Okay.
So if you have your Teamsters contract, financial overview in the drive. So the biggest, first thing you'll see right away at the top there was the changes, to the percentages for this group. So their share of costs for their healthcare is going to rise from now it was 94.6. It's going to go up to 7, 8, 9. And at the end of this 4-year contract, they'll be contributing 10% to their healthcare. We did add a single health insurance buyout. So they have buyouts for family and 2-person, but the single was put in play because of under the Affordable Care Act, if you're 26 and under, you can stay on your parents' health insurance. So if you hire that employee, you might encourage them to do that. We had that change in the dental that actually came in at a lower premium cost for us and really just shifted the burden from 2 different categories. And we increased their life insurance from 25,000 to 50,000. The pay increase on the wage base scale is 3.8% in each year of the contract. So in year 1, our first year employee will be making $19.91. In year 10, that first year goes to $22.28. And somebody on step 10 in the first year would be making $26.59. And the last year of the contract, they would be up to $29.75. The longevity starts at year 7, whereas if you've been us for that long, you get a $150 longevity addition to your salary. And if you're after 21 years, that becomes $650. Some of the subtle changes in the contract were with the night custodians during the summertime. So in previous contracts, if they were asked to move to days, they got day pay. So that has changed. They maintain their night rate, but they will be working the day shift so we have all of our staff on at one point in time. Slight increase to their apparel reimbursements. And I think on the flip side, you can see the total cost of the contract in the first year, $38,491. That's where we see slightly larger savings in health insurance, dental and all the rest of it. And then year 2 is $27,191. Year 3 is $28,426. And year 4 is $28,000. So the tax impact for a person with a $500,000 home on this, it would be $13.80 in year 1, and then relatively stable at $10 after that. Any questions on, yes?
So I think the obvious question that people will ask is for every 1% increase that the employees are taking in their share of the healthcare premiums, roughly what does that equate to in an hourly wage?
Does it equate to an hourly wage?
In other words, you're saying, I know the argument is we're gonna give them 3.8% because they're accepting a 1% increase in their
Mhm.
healthcare costs, so I think the logical question is what is the equation?
Yeah.
And granted, those are gonna be average numbers.
These are my copies that were supposed to be here a little while ago, so let me just see what I got here. All right. I don't think I did the math that way. Steve, I've got it like in the teachers, I've got it broken out so that you can see what the literal numbers are, but I don't think I have it broken out for that. So like on the teacher's contract, for instance, so the cost of a single plan, and this is true across both, is $13,884. When we move to 15% share at the end of the teacher's contract, they'll be paying $2,082 would be their share. At 7%, which is the current contract, it's $971. So the increase to the employee over the course of that for a single is $1,111. So that would be our savings. I did not do that math for the Hess contract.
Okay, but that's over 4 years.
That is over 4 years, and it is a smaller percentage, right? It's 7, 8, 9, and 10. It's not 10, 12, and 15. And the simple answer to that is these are lower paid employees. So to take a higher share would create a higher burden.
Yep.
And we didn't feel that was an equitable thing to do. So I will work on that for next week.
Given what you're telling me, I think I could probably come up with the numbers myself, but it leads back to something we've talked about the last couple of years, that perhaps the people coming on board that aren't covered, they come on board, so legally they're covered by the current contract, but why doesn't the current contract say that they're gonna start paying at 10%? Last year, I think we all left with the impression that that was the way that all the contracts were being written. I think earlier this year you said, no, that was a misunderstanding. It's only the Teamsters and the other contract. It's not the Hess contract.
The Hess contract is at 90-10, I believe is the number.
Okay. But you understand where I'm driving with this. Why, in the negotiations, is that not a reasonable ask at somebody's that's just starting at the district? They're not, they come in under the contract, but the contract says you start at 10%.
But for a new employee, not for
Correct.
a present employee.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's all part of things that are discussed during the negotiation process. But it is a negotiation, and
I hear that.
Yeah.
But, we're hiring dishwashers at $16 an hour when we used to pay $10 an hour. So I certainly understand the labor. It just, budgets are to people that negotiate contracts and the people that are business managers, budgets are dollars and cents, but budgets are also political because they are a statement of our values of our community and how we want to treat the people that work in our schools. And I know you didn't like this the first time I said it, but I think that the town kind of set the tone of the 10% pay raise over 3 years. To go above that in this political and economic climate, I think was a little bit tone deaf, but that will be up to the voters to decide. But
that will be up to the voters to decide. And as I said, I don't negotiate for the town.
Understood.
So,
Yep.
or I should say, the school district didn't negotiate for the town. And
Reminder, the town does not have unions.
I understand that as well.
I also think like, to your point, Steve, like it is it can be like a value statement. I hear what you're saying, but I also think like, it doesn't strike me as a particularly, at least I don't want to like pit our firefighters against our teachers in that way. Like they are both, one could argue maybe the town should have looked at bumping their raises up to what the school was doing. Like they're all public servants after all. I'm a little hesitant to create a perception, like, again, personally, teachers are some of the hardest working people who have the toughest jobs out there, and relative to the value they bring to society are wildly underpaid, I would say, for the work that they do. I certainly could not. I get paid more than the average teacher for what I do, and I'm 100% positive that their job is harder than mine on a daily basis. So,
And I apologize if my remarks are taken that way. That's certainly not my intent.
no, I know. I just and equally so to our firefighters and our police force. So I just want to be careful as personally, I want to be careful to not like create a perception that we're pitting one public servant against the other, particularly with our federal government doing enough of that on its own. Any other questions on this?
I'll change the temperature somewhat. What is the amount for the single health insurance buyout?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't remember. I think it's 1,500 in the teacher's contract. I think it's similar. Yeah. I think it's very similar.
Yeah,
For everybody.
yeah, for the town, just for informational purposes, it's 4,000 across the board.
I know the teacher's one is jammed in my head. The Hess one I
Oh.
don't have right off the top of my head.
Okay.
But I'm sure it's right in line with that number. And it's 1,500 for a family, 1,500 for a single. Okay.
Any other questions?
On the HEA side. So again, the healthcare premiums were a major goal for us to get that cost share to increase, and something we've heard loud and clear from people over the last, well, as long as I've been on the board, I guess. And prior to that. So the first year of the contract, the premium share is 10%. The second year, it's 12%. In the last year, it's 15%. Their increase to the wage-based scale is 4.75 in the first year, 3.75 in the second, and 3.75 in the third. And again, the higher amount in the first year was the offset to the increase in the healthcare premiums. People need to be, whole. So that made that happen financially. Bachelor step one will get $1,000 bonus in their first 2 years. And the rationale for that was, as we looked at different contracts out there and what people were getting, the $50,000 to start is sort of the base number. But in order to get the BA there, that creates an impact across the rest of the budget, which was just not realistic. So the easy way to increase the rate to that first year teacher was to do it through that bonus. So it didn't impact the scale throughout. They also have two other offerings, the SOS 25 and a high premium open access high deductible plan. We judged our costs on people perhaps moving to the SOS 25 plan. That's part of the savings that are built in there. We did not factor in people moving to the high deductible because we were not advised to do that. Part of all of these contracts have to be vetted through the DRA at some level in terms of, reasonable likelihood. There was so teacher preparation is the next bulleted item on your list. So at the middle high school, when there are IEP meetings, it is much easier to plan them and get coverage. So a teacher needs to be present. It's a little more difficult at the elementary schools. So sometimes people lose their prep time to cover those meetings beyond the amount they're allocated. So there's a compensation for that. The curriculum rate for summer went from $32 to $40. And that, to be very clear, is what teachers, so if you are assigned a new course to teach, you can request some compensation to build that curriculum or to work on that curriculum during the summer, and or to enhance a course that you're currently teaching. So that's where that money is for. The early retirement, as I had mentioned previously, was increased in the 55 to 59 range by $2,000. So the higher end of that is someone requesting at 55 goes to $49,000 would be the incentive, and then it drops to 47, 45, and 43. Again, we did that at that high end because we get a higher return when that happens, being able to hopefully hire somebody in the BA7 to MA7 range. There were no changes at the ages of 60 to 64. Schedule B, we simplified to a certain degree. It used to be a 3-track system, years of experience for coaching or doing a club 1 to 4, 5 to 8, and then 9+. So that's now 2 tracks, so 1 to 4 and 5+ experience. And then we also created a nursing RN track that is more in sync with the reality of hiring nurses now that used to be on the BA track, and we're essentially being underpaid. And there's also, and I will not speak to this because I will mess it up, but there's some legality to how much you have to pay your nurses. So we are now in sync with that law. Cost of the contract in that first year is $455,364. Significant amount of savings from health and dental in the first year, $97,000 on health and $46,000 on dental. Years 2 and 3, the health savings are still there, but it's a smaller amount. So it's $54,000 in year 2 and $74,000 in year 3. Cost of the contract in those 2 following years is $487,000 and $472,000. And then you have your tax rates there as well. Just to kind of go back to what I was saying, I'll do the other end. So a family plan is currently, the SOS 20 is $37,488. At 7%, the employee is contributing $2,633. At the end of contract, when it is 15%, they'll be contributing $5,623, essentially $3,000 more than they currently are.
Rob, I have a question about the prep time bullet.
Yeah.
What does that translate into in terms of, like, if you look at maybe it doesn't, but if you look at the wages line, how much of that, I'm sure it's small, but how much of that is due to compensation, extra compensation if a teacher's prep time falls below 300? I mean, you have to model that, put some money in the budget.
That's brutal, Mark. If I had my earpiece here, Laura could probably give me that number, but I get it. I understand what you're saying, but in terms of the total increase, the 487, it's pretty small. But yeah, I don't.
So the idea is that a teacher should have at least 5 hours a week for prep time. And if they are unable to get that because of time spent on work on IEPs.
Not work on IEPs. So to be clear, well, I guess it's fair to say work. They are in an IEP meeting.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
you gotta, I won't get the language right. You
Yeah.
will. Then they presumably have to work more hours than their contract calls for. Is that why this additional
Yeah, well, they're losing that prep time and we're compensating them for that loss of that. The prep time equates to, part of their wages.
But are you compensating them with the expectation that they will then work that additional time?
The assumption is that they need that 300 minutes of prep time. And if we are not giving them that, then they're going to have to make it up somewhere else. So they should be paid in addition to that. Yes. It's like, so if end up spending an hour at an IEP meeting and I fall below that 300 minutes,
Mhm.
I've got to make that time up somewhere. So typically that is part of what happens during my school week. So now we are compensating you for having to do that on quote unquote your own time. That's not to say that teachers aren't doing lots of prep time outside of the parameters of school.
Sure.
But it is, if you're telling people that they have an X amount of hours for preparation and then you take away that time, you're not really living up to the contract. You've essentially violated the contract. So this is a means to make sure that we're not doing that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I understand it.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm going to say it makes sense to me, but I understand it.
Okay.
Yes, I wasn't questioning it at all, but the first thought that just came in my mind is we've always been considered as teachers salaried, right?
Yeah.
And so now we're almost giving like I just throwing that, it's a little confusing to me. Because your salary, you put in the time you need to do, no matter when you have to.
You do put in the time you need to do, but again, in the contract, it says part of it's not really your compensation, but part of your work week is you will have 300 minutes, 5 hours of preparation time, correcting, planning, so on and so forth. So if I said to you, Debbie, that, well, you know what, this week, I can't give you those 5 hours because you need to spend 5 hours in IEP meetings. Where are you going to get those 300 minutes from?
I understand fully. It's nice that it's in the contract because I never had that in my contract. But that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just it's a different model of how I think for people who are in the private sector, salaried employees, you have things you have to get done and you work the hours you need to get them done. This is a very different structure. So it's hard, I think, sometimes like to cognitively understand I understand the approach, but I think sometimes it can feel a little, it's very different, right? And because being a teacher is different and there's a different value proposition and things that you trade off in compensation and other things. And so this is one example, but it intuitively, I think, can feel a little bit confusing when for most people in the private sector, it's conception of what does it mean to be a salaried employee.
Mr. Nato, can I add something? In a former job that I had, I was a salaried employee. However, if I worked over 40 hours in increments of 1 hour, I could log what they called comp time. And so I was able to then use that toward a day off when I wouldn't be at work. I would not be reducing my earned time and I would still be paid. And that was not in a public sector job. So I think it's like akin to that. It's comp time, but hourly and with money instead of a paycheck that doesn't change.
So, Robin, the overall scheme of the dollars we're talking about for this, if I look at the year one graph, curriculum hourly rate of 6,400, is that the amount we're talking about for this?
That's the amount for the change from $32 to $40 an hour for the summer curriculum work that teachers do.
Oh, so that's for a different issue than we're just talking.
That's the one I previously stated, that if
Okay.
you're doing work on your curriculum during, if you're doing work during the summertime on the courses and you apply and it's accepted, because it's not always accepted, that again is part of the job. But if you're doing new work and you say, hey, I want to, many times, like I can remember they said to me, well, guess what? Next year you're going to be teaching military history. And we've never had that curriculum before. Okay, so that needs to happen. So you apply to do some of that work in the summertime and the rate was $32 an hour. That's been increased to 40. That's the $6,000.
Looking at that same chart, dental in year one is declining by $46,000. Is there a change in the policy, or why is that going down?
Yeah, so essentially this is a change where you paid previously 80% for things like crowns and that kind of stuff. That has flipped to a different category. So the cost shares go up a little bit for them, but overall it brought down our costs substantially. Yeah, let me find it. I hope I've got it. Oh, yeah, I can give you the specifics on what the change was, but it was a modest difference. And you know, in your dental plans, when you pay 80% for things and, 100% for others, those flipped.
So the bottom line is that the teachers are gonna have to pay somewhat higher.
Or maybe somewhat lower, depending. So you're going to pay a little bit more for certain services, but you're going to pay less for other services. It's just a flip in the categories.
But the district's gonna be saving.
The district is saving money.
Okay.
Yes.
And also, why is life insurance down?
Because we had a plan that it was 1.5 times salary. And, we felt that that was generous. And it was an area that we could negotiate down a little bit, and we did. The previous contract was 1.5 times your salary, so this is 1 times.
I have a question.
Yep.
Does the snapshot salaries and benefits lines reflect the new contracts? Are the snapshots written as if the contract's passed?
So to be clear, the top part where it says salaries and benefits and those reductions in costs,
Yes.
that does not include the contracts. Contracts are separate,
Okay.
okay? But the contract line includes all salaries and benefits. So when we talk about the 455, 365, that is salaries and benefits. You can't write an operating budget with a pending contract based on what may or may not pass. You have to do it based on current employees and the current contract. That makes sense?
Any other questions or comments for Rob on HEA? All right,
Sorry.
go for it.
Rob, if you said this, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think and read and listen at the same time, which isn't going that well.
Can't you go?
On a percentage basis, what is the percent reduction on the healthcare cost to the district in year one?
Percentage basis.
I see the dollar is 97 to 96.
I have no idea, Mark.
And the reason
Off the
that,
top of my head, I have no idea.
okay, what is I think what I was processing through, and you may have said this already, is so the first bullet, the top line bullet, which is what I think many will focus on, is the wage increases,
Yep.
right? 4 3/4 the first year, 3 3/4, and 3 3/4. So whatever that adds up to, 12.25% over 3 years. That is like the take home that most people will immediately focus on. And what you've helped us understand, I think, is that there's an offset in increased healthcare contributions. And people can agree or disagree on whether the percentages are what you should have achieved in the contract negotiations, but there's an offset there. And part of the reason that year one is at 4.75% was to get that step up from 7 to 10% coverage on the SOS 20 plan.
Right.
And I think it might be helpful, like, to where I presenting this, that would be my second bullet. My first bullet is what are the wage increases? And my second bullet would be, and what are the percent increases in healthcare contributions by the teachers? Because they do partially offset, and that is part of the rationale of how you came to these numbers.
Right.
Again, whether people think it was the right, the right number is, that's up for people to decide, but
So-
it,
I just want to understand what you're suggesting. So we have the percent increases in terms of shares. You want the percent savings? I'm not really clear because
well, is that a percent increase in the share, or that's just what their percent is? That's what their
so we,
copay is.
they're in year, not a copay.
Sorry, they're,
In year one, their share of healthcare is 10% of the cost. In year two, it's 12%. And in year three, it's 15%.
right, but it's currently 7%.
Correct.
Right, so their increase in their share in year one, and what it is today is 40%. I mean, essentially, they're paying 40% more. They're paying 7% now. Sorry, they're paying 3%.
3% more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would show is increase employee healthcare contribution is 3% in year one, plus 2% in year two, plus 3% in year three. Maybe that's the wrong comparison.
I just assumed that I could say, well, they're paying 7% now and they're going to pay 10% and that's 3%. I mean, the dictum here has always been, it's been not enough of a cost share, and the standard that we've been receiving is 15% is the norm. So that's the way we structured the numbers in terms of the presentation,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Maybe you're saying.
Good.
Okay. I mean, there's a net figure, right? That's something less than 475, which is, I don't, off the top of my head, roughly 20% lower as far as the take home pay number.
I think that's what I was kind of getting at, but you're going to articulate it better.
So instead of, you could display right above the gross base increase, a net increase, which is something like 3%.
Yeah, I'd have to really think about, because the percent increase to the healthcare, you'd have to figure that out in terms of what their cost increase to them are minus the 4.75%, and then what step you are. It gets a little wonky and in the weeds. We'll certainly discuss it in terms of,
I mean, it's a lot of
presentation.
assumptions, as you said, but like if you just take like a teacher making 68K this year and they have these step raises, they're gonna have a raise of like a little over 3,000 in year one, somewhere around 2,600 in year two, and somewhere around a little bit more than 2,600 in year three. So that's gonna be like 8,600 over 3 years. And then their health insurance from today, if they have a 20K plan, which is that like mostly correct for a family plan?
most of them, probably, we have probably more family plans than anything else, yes.
And they're paying 7%, that's 1,400, and then that's gonna go up to over 3,000. So their healthcare is gonna increase about 1,500 in the amount they're paying. So then their net raise is closer to like 7 grand. I don't know what the percentage of that is, percentage wise, but that's like the math, basically,
Mhm.
right?
That's basically kind of what I was trying to get at, is that the net is lower than, I think the take home message that many will have is 12.25% increase over 3 years. And that is what it is for wages. But the net in take home pay is lower than that.
It's about 356. So it's if basically 571 is 475, then the 571 minus the health and dental is 428, which equates to 3.56%. So I think that's the most straightforward, like net figure.
I think what we can do is
Right,
model,
dollars.
as we did, some examples of an employee. Pick a range, masters, 7. This is the earnings. This would be what the raise is. This is the healthcare, so that you can see it. We can just do a couple of examples.
Mhm.
Okay. That we can do. Yes, sir.
This might be a crystal ball question for you, but a few years ago, we paid the school district paid the premium, and now we're up to 15% in 27-28. Do you anticipate that the share of premium will continue to rise beyond 50%?
I don't want to get that crystal ball out. I'll leave that to the next person who negotiates the next contract in 3 years' time.
I mean, as an industry trend. No,
I don't have that crystal ball.
fair enough.
There's a lot of things going on in the world, as we all know, so we shall see.
I would just like to say it's, I think this contract shows a lot of thought, a lot of fairness, I think, on both sides. And I appreciate all the negotiating that went into it. And I also want to say, because it's mentioned a lot, that we show appreciation for our teachers. And I think just looking at this and my many years of teaching, that this contract shows, it doesn't just say we want, it shows the respect for the work that teachers give. And I think the one line, just the fact that you recognize they need the planning periods in order to do the job that they need to do, and most are doing well beyond the compensation if they are called to do something else, and recognizing that the planning is an important part of their job. I don't know. I just think that's real commendable and shows the district puts out a lot of respect for the teachers that they hire.
I guess there's one more thing that I just misinformation that I received in terms of where our pay scales are in contrast to others, and what did we look at per comp? So just if you look at our current contract, BA1 starts at $42,933. That's this year. And John Stark, BA1 starts at $41,739. So we pay about $1,000 more than John Stark. Kearsarge is at $41,181. Again, we're paying a little bit more than Kearsarge. Bo is at $42,913. We pay $20 more than they do. Concord is at $51,456. They are by far the best paying district in the area. So the notion that we are paying well above and beyond what other school districts are paying is not accurate. We are right on par with the schools that we used as comps, in that we tend to compete with for teachers in terms of recruitment and retention. On the high end, it's a very similar number. If you look at top of the scale in Bo, it's 85. This is this current year, not in our contract, not the proposed contract. 85,904. We're at 83,846. John Stark is lower at 75,000. I'm not sure what their incentives are for longevity. Top of scale at Concord this year is 101,000. So, we think about all of those things. Concord is definitely the best paid, but we are on par within, a marginal range that I think is fair for other school districts. And that's part of the reason why we had that little bonus built into the BA1 step. Just for folks to know.
How competitive are school districts? I mean, if a teacher sees Concord is $5,000 at 10,000 above us, do we lose teachers quickly, or are teachers more sedentary in long term in their employment?
Sedentary.
Well,
We have lost teachers to I know we've lost teachers to Concord.
Interesting question. So I think that it really depends where you are in your lifespan as a teacher. in what it is that you're teaching. So if you're early on in the game, and if I was a social studies teacher in Hopkinton and loved my job, but a position came open in Concord and I knew I was going to get perhaps $10,000 more, I might love my job a little bit less and move on down the road. I think that the reality for when we are hiring in some of the positions that we would call critical need, case managers in special ed, math and science, we do see people coming across with higher in their years, they're at step 12, 13, 14, that want to come to us, not only for the school district, but perhaps because, it's a little bit more money than what they were making, but it's marginal. So it depends where you are. I don't know if teachers are sedentary. It's usually more about
Poor choice of words.
the school district, how it's run, how well it's run, the community, the commute. For me, my first 2 years, I love teaching at Hollis Brookline, but man, it's a long drive over Mount Vernon every day, back and forth. When their school starts at 7:20 in the morning and you leave here at 6 to find out when you drive in that school was canceled for snow. That was a drag. Anyway, so yeah, when Hopkinton opened, it was a no-brainer for me, and yeah, a lot of variables like any other job.
Thank you for that insight.
I guess one question, one comment. The question, obviously, there's been lately some dispersions cast. I'd like you to put aside for a minute your role as Rob Nato, school board member that's here to explain the contract, and just Rob Nato that negotiated the contract. You feel this was the best contract that you guys could negotiate as far as keeping teachers, getting new qualified teachers, and taking care of the taxpayers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, Steve, I didn't want to censor anything that you were saying on this board.
Well,
I was only trying to speak personally that,
You're the last.
I don't wanna-
percent is what I have to say.
all right.
And secondly, a common, being a long-term resident who actually went through the school system and had our last two kids are graduating this year. It's a rare school system where you have teachers that teach the parents and then teach the children. It is a large part of the excellence that is the Hopkinton school system. And I know we've talked in the last couple of years about incentivizing some of the older teachers to leave and the younger teachers to come in. And I think I said the same thing back then. Commendable for the taxpayers, but also that a large part of the success of our school system has been the teachers and the longevity of a lot of the teachers. So I throw that out there.
I would agree completely. Not only as somebody who worked there, but somebody whose kids went through, the whole grade 1 kindergarten to graduation. And seeing some students when they come back around and you've had their parents is a little bit freaky, I just want to say. Not snowing in here, but it's a little gray up there. Anything else? All right,
Thank you so much, Rob.
thank you.
All right, we will let you settle back in your seat.
Thank you.
And then, so I think what we're gonna do, folks, if the committee is amenable, I'm inclined to open it for public comment and then close public comment, have a final discussion as a board, and then take a vote on moving the numbers forward. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. All right, so we'll let Mr. Nato come back to his seat and then we'll open for public comment. No problem. I'll start my little spiel that I do. Thank you for everyone who came tonight and showed up on Zoom. We appreciate the civic participation in our committee. We like to keep things polite and respectful around here. So when you come up, just make sure to introduce your name and your address for the record. And with that, we'll kick it off. All right, we have a hand up online. So Mr. Foley, go ahead and unmute yourself. You can go ahead and speak now, I think. Mr. Foley?
Yes, can you
Okay,
hear me
yes,
now?
we can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, my question is, and it's not necessarily for this budget, but a lot of school systems and a lot of industries let the employee carry over their sick time to the next year. So what impact that has is when it's time for that teacher to retire, 10, 15, 20 years, they've accrued a number of hours that they put into their sick bank time that gets carried over from one year to another. And that could be a significant dollar amount when that teacher retires, that we're liable to pay them for their vacation time that they didn't, I'm sorry, sick time that they did not take throughout their career. And I didn't know if Ron or somebody knows whether it's not maybe this year, but each year we don't do that, there are a number of teachers that are accruing a lot of significant hours. And of course, at that point when they retire, they're making significant higher dollars, and therefore it will impact the salary and wages that are paid in the future. So a lot of industries may say you cannot carry over more than 100 hours, 150 hours, and not be in the category of being in several $100s that then are as a cost to the school district. So I just wanted to make a comment on that. But Ron, I think you've done an outstanding job of the way you've presented. And early on, I was mystified by everything, but I've seen all the hard work you've done, and I'm in a point of agreeing with this budget as presented.
Thank you, Mike. So I just want to clarify, it's a very good point on the sick bank. And it's something I have to wear a couple of different hats here. So teachers do accrue sick days. So if you don't use them, you can accrue them, but they do not cash out sick days in our contract at all. So if like when I left, I think I had 100 and some odd sick days. Because it's a lot easier to go to work than to take a day off. But there's zero payment for that.
Okay, very good.
On sick days. Some school districts do that, but we do not and have not in the last 25 years.
Excellent. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Laura, I think your hand is up. So if you would like to unmute and go ahead.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Laura Taylor, I am the assistant BA over at the school district. I also live on Tyler Road in town. So I apologize for not being there tonight, hoping I can provide a little bit of light in the areas that Rob, doesn't have that tiny micro level that I do. So I do want to just mention, to Mark's point, he was asking about what the costing is for the payment for under 300 minutes. And there is no dollar value for that in the estimated warrant. And the reason for that is that we've never paid it before. So I was able to take a historical view of the curriculum hourly rate, figure out exactly how many hours we paid in the last couple of years, and then multiply that with a new $40 an hour rate and get a number for us. But because we've never had a payment for these hours, I didn't feel comfortable adding that as a warrant article with an unknown. So we are prepared to essentially eat any cost we have for that in the first year of the contract. In addition, Teamsters buyout for single is the same as our current Teamsters agreement, which is 30% of the cost of the plan, which is our driver plan. So while that seems high, remember it is still 60 4% less than if we were to actually cover their insurance. But to thank you, just to Rob's credit, thank you so much for all of the presenting. And we have scoured this budget. We have tried to cut as much as possible. And so I really feel like as a new member coming into this, this is a very conservative budget that the school is presenting, and I really hope it gets supported. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. Any other comments for the evening? All right. Okay, certainly.
Arnold Coda, 400 Gould Hill Road. I'm unclear on just one thing, and I have only one question. If everything that has been included in the budget is in fact passed at annual meeting, what is the final tax rate increase?
$16?
For everything,
For
the
everything.
reserve funds, the contracts and everything?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have one of these?
No, I don't.
I'll get you.
It's really
There you
helpful.
go.
Sure. Come on up, Norm. I
Well,
think actually
please-
that you
please
should just
use-
stand at the microphone today. Sorry I did say come up and take a seat, but I think I'm misdirected.
No problem. Norm Gupel, 121 Amesbury, just real quick.
Snapshot.
I came here tonight because I really wanted to say thank you to Mark and Debbie for your time on the budget committee. I didn't want to say this in our public hearing because that's not the forum for it. But you know, when I was with you guys on here, you brought out the best of me and challenged me. And I just wanted to take time to show appreciation for the time that you gave in the budget committee. It really grew me into an individual, and thank you for that. Good luck with your everything.
Got any cookies? Thank you, Norm.
All right. Okay, with that, we will close public comment. And we'll open it up to discussion on the committee about the school district budget. So I believe, Neil will keep me honest, that we have to take a vote on moving the school budget forward to the hearing, but not the warrant articles.
Right. You'll vote
But
on
we
the
could-
warrant articles, whether to recommend or
hearing.
not after the hearing.
Yes,
But the budget is yours technically.
right.
Motion, or do you want to just go on the table real quick and get everybody's comments or?
I think I will ask if anyone has a comment or discussion. So now is our chance to comment or discuss. And if there's none, then I'll ask for a motion.
Could I just have a clarification on the FTEs for this budget?
Which clarification would you like?
What is the FTEs? It was 198, but with the two that you're not going to hire, does that change the FTEs?
I knew you were gonna ask that question. So maybe. Isn't that?
Cut it out.
So we have a retirement and we have a consolidation. Okay? Which means that there's a position that may be shifting. How it shifts and in what manner it shifts, that is an unknown. But essentially, there are the retirement, the consolidation in these two IAs. So it's going to be pretty darn close to the same.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't mean to be curt about the consolidation piece, but it's also not appropriate to talk about somebody's potential job change before they know about that potential job. That would not be cool.
I have a general question, which is not specific to next year's budget, but I was wondering, because you guys highlighted average daily attendance as an important figure last budget season, and I was wondering, is our average daily attendance this year more, less, or the same as last year? But I don't expect an answer to that today.
Thank God. Things I don't really pay attention to on a daily basis, Vicky, but I will find out for you.
For that. All right. Any other discussion? Or can I get a motion to vote on the budget as proposed?
I move.
Okay, hold on.
Second.
Oh. I don't know what he moved, so I think he has to stop speaking before you can.
I caught $1 million. I move, we move forward the revised budget from the school board, which is the exact number is. I need new glasses, Rob, so I'm
gonna read it.
hand with some.
27,491,895.
Is that what you were going to second?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, all in favor of the revised operating budget? Aye. Okay. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. All not in favor, say nay. Okay, the ayes have it. So moved. Sorry, that was awkward. I forgot exactly how to take a vote, I guess, tonight. Anyway, the revised budget passes and moves forward to public hearing on February 12th. Thank you. And I just once again want to say thank you to the school board for working with this committee and taking the feedback so thoughtfully. And finding a way to kind of do what is best for our community while still protecting the integrity of our schools and our teachers. So thank you for that. Any other business to come before the committee? I have like one last closing statement that I want to make to stand on my own soapbox, but is there any other business before us to do that?
I think we need to discuss the summary sheet.
Yes, thank you, Don.
And sort of how you're doing the public hearing. I assume the individuals will present their budgets,
What do you mean how we will do it?
the format you want to use for next week's budget hearing.
Historically, we have had the individuals present the budgets,
Okay,
I believe.
I'm just asking.
Yeah.
To confirm
Is
that.
there an alternative? Yeah,
You can present them all.
I can
Yeah.
present them all, yeah. No, I don't think so. I mean, so let's discuss the sheet first, then we'll talk about the format of the hearings next week. Okay, so Dawn spent countless hours, and I think with Laura, and I think with Rob, and with Neil, putting together the sheet.
Mark,
And Mark, yes. And trying to call me while I was in work calls to talk about it. So, thank you very much, Don, for your hard work on this. Do you want to speak to it? You should speak to it since you put it together.
Yeah, give us.
We talked, I mean, we briefly talked about it in the last meeting, but,
the page that is has the least coloring on it is one version of this. Both Mark and Krista wanted to highlight at least a portion of this thing in one fashion or another. And I think the idea of highlighting the total tax rate portion up there in the top corner is really what most people will first focus on when they sit down and, think about this. What's the tax impact? So that deals with just basically the change in what we had from last budget to this new budget for the various entities. And then you move down to the next section would be the gross numbers of the increase. And then you get down to the third section, which shows the impact of the warrant articles that are already included in those numbers at the top. And it so states that. Now, on the back side, just a little different approach, and again, this is just, we can do it any way you want. But say for the school board meeting, they're going to be mostly focused on what's relative to the school board. You have the top corner, which highlights the general increase for everybody. And then you would be focused on perhaps looking at the warrant articles for the school primarily. So you might highlight that in that section. And then for the town meeting, we do the opposite and just highlight the municipal. What creates a little bit of a paper issue perhaps, because you couldn't use the leftover ones from the school board to the town meeting. I think it highlights, it focuses you a little bit better. the precincts are in here because you got 600 people in Kentucky Village. And you got 200 people in Hopkinton, and that also at the same time need to balance that act in their mind as to what's the impact of their cost of being in either one of those precincts. Little controversial on the bottom part. Both Krista and Mark have talked about maybe that shouldn't be there. I would like to keep it in there because most people don't know and recognize what the total value of the assets are in town and how that perhaps figures into the tax rate. And there's always the question of why is the state education number a little bit different than the town number? Well, the state's wisdom is that the utilities should be subtracted out of that when you calculate the school tax rate. And then I'm sure most people have no idea what the value of the property is in for the Kentucky precinct and the Hopkinton precinct. But just to show that, I think is just a little bit more education as to how these numbers get derived. And the little note on the right just gives you an idea of if you have, 14,000, it's about a cent on the tax rate. And if you jump that up to 10 cents, it's, you just move the decimal point over. That's sort of the summation of this. Again, trying to match the numbers up is a nightmare. As anyone who does these kinds of things, you're always off 1 cent because the calculations are based on different numbers, the size of numbers, et cetera. So a few of these, if you literally went through the formula to do it, it wouldn't come out exactly. It's a penny off. But for people to look at this, I think it's important that they see the same number and don't get wandering away as to why is it different.
So does this, down at the bottom, this part, where it says assess property values. And then it says use for town and school, does this number read 1,395,381,488?
Exactly.
Okay. That's how much all of the properties in town added up together are
Correct.
valued at.
Correct. And your small change that you come in with.
Oh, just a small 85 million for the precinct.
Right.
Congratulations on getting this onto one page, which I know you were skeptical of. John.
The bigger page.
You cheated a little bit, but
You can get it on 8.5 by 11, but the font will be small.
So
But again, Krista wanted to add in the second section down. That was not on the original one, and I think that brings a different perspective on it, but the numbers all sort of balance out, so you get a little different idea of what goes into the numbers.
So the only difference is what's emphasized?
Oh, yeah,
What's colored in?
yeah,
That's the
on
only
the back and
difference?
front, yeah, the
Okay.
formatting.
And again, it's your choice as to how you think it best represents going towards, again, there's two different meetings. We got the school board meeting, which again, will highlight the warrants for the school board. And on the town, we would just take it off the school and put it on to the town numbers for the warrants. Or it could be all left blank with no shading.
I think this is super helpful and what
Yes.
a lot of people have been asking for. So thank you.
Really lays it out.
I didn't give Mark all of the things that he suggested, but I got most of them.
I'd like to.
You have editorial license to reject suggestions.
Pardon?
So this is your baby. You have editorial license to not accept all suggestions.
I was going to thank everybody who was involved in the process.
It's a
I
process.
think it's certainly very worthwhile to have available at all of the meetings. And I think the shading idea helps.
A lot of help from both Neil and especially from Laura. She was really, really helpful in working with me to do this and just very, very cooperative.
So I think the plan would be then, if we're agreed on its utility and helpfulness, then we would plan to post it for our hearing so that it's available to community to view and not just up here on our desks.
Yeah.
And then assuming, or whatever the numbers come out of the hearing as, then we would make a copy available at both town and school meeting for the public as well.
Hard copies for everybody
Yeah.
that comes in the door.
Right.
Generally do hard copies at the hearing, so we could have this printed for next
Yes.
week.
Yes.
For the hearing, would it be because we're gonna have everybody there, would it be good not to shade in?
Yeah,
As we did for the school, we just leave it.
leave it blank, I think, yeah.
The tax
Okay.
rate portion.
Well, no, is it just don't shade the warrant part, but leave the top right-hand corner shaded.
I think that sounds great. Okay. Thank you so much, John.
You're welcome.
I don't think this is something that we need to vote on as long as there's general consensus.
Mhm.
Okay.
Can I just make a suggestion? I'm not sure what the right phrasing would be, but in sort of the bottom half. On the right-hand side columns where it says total tax rate impact several times. I think that might be confusing because a lot of times we discuss tax rate increases as what is the impact on the tax rate. So to me, it reads like this is how much it's going up by when actually this is the total. And I'm not sure how to fix that. I'm just throwing it out there. Usually when we say what's the tax rate impact, that means what is the change, not what is the total. You know?
It's an easy fix, just take the word total out of those three. Certain
Or
precedents.
take impact out.
Certain precedents that
Yeah.
people wanted that in there, so.
I
No.
think I would take impact
I
out.
think the word impact is what is tripping me up
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it makes it feel like this is what it's changing by.
Do you want to just put total tax rate?
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Thank you.
Good, that's an easy fix.
Great.
And again, if you've got minor things like that you want change, give me a call. I do not want to get into any major changes of what's presented. I've had it on this.
And no changes after Monday,
Okay,
because we have to print them.
sounds
No
good.
printing them at 5:15.
Okay. Right.
Good, thanks.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate it.
Good job.
In regard to the
We'll talk about that.
format of the public hearing,
Yeah.
I'm assuming the expectation is, do we want Ken and I to do the same presentations that we did, or actually everybody to do the same presentations? Do you want us to try and condense it and assume people have listened a bit? Like what's,
Yes.
which of those?
I think at this point that the information's been out here for 60, 90 days. There's been a lot of discussion about it. There will be some people at the hearing that are seeing it the first time, but they will be able to see the full presentation at the school and the town meetings. So I would say condensed. That way it gives more time for public comment and it gives us more time for discussion. If that makes sense to everybody.
Can you remind me, Ken and Rob, like how long were your, like I don't feel like your presentation, Ken, was particularly long on the town when you presented to us. So when I think about the idea of Ken condensing and knowing that there are people who will come to the public hearing and this will be their first time.
Okay.
And so for them to be able to actually ask the questions, I guess I want to make it as accessible to somebody who's a newbie as possible without going overboard. So
Yeah, I was thinking that in the presentation, I try to anticipate questions, so it might actually be quicker if it's addressed in the presentation. But I don't know, I didn't time the presentation. Was it 20, 25 minutes maybe, if that?
Remember.
Well, you have your operating budget presentation, then you're gonna have the on the bonds.
Yep.
And we're gonna have our contracts, so that's a lot of detail.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I'm happy to do whatever folks want.
I would say on the town's point, on Monday, at 6 o'clock, there are bond hearings, which will go specifically much more in depth into the bond information. And I think we've talked about not including a lot of detail other than the numbers at the budget hearing on the bond.
Yeah, I think my bond presentation, previously for all three, might have taken up 5 minutes or something.
I mean, just logistically, if you each take, call it 40 minutes and the precincts take 20 minutes, that's,
5 minutes.
Yeah, 5.
okay, yeah.
20 minutes.
I mean, that's max 2 hours of presentation and public. And then there's discussion and public comment, like, and I don't think. I would guess this committee is not gonna discuss ad nauseum. Probably, like, we've had a lot of deliberative sessions already. I mean, I don't want to prevent anyone from talking. Certainly, if we stay here till 10 o'clock, we stay here till 10 o'clock, but I would be surprised.
I mean, if some comments come up that none of us have ever thought about.
Yeah,
It would be worth discussing for sure, but if there are any of those.
I would say cover the main points. All the main, like, let's not condense it, like, cover the main points with an eye towards brevity where possible, and we'll kind of march through that way. Is that fair? Okay. So we'll have the individuals present each to answer your question on format.
And we do an introduction.
Will I do an introduction?
Sometimes the budget chair does an introduction. I don't know, a summary of the total or any process.
I certainly can. Do folks feel like that would be helpful? Okay, yes, I will do that. We had, okay, to your point, Neil, we had discussed previously the idea of the budget committee having some kind of presentation or more like formal opinionated stance on how we thought about things. I'm like more than happy to put together 2 or 3 slides on process and things we thought about. The fact that Don put together this sheet this year, and give whoever's here from the public like a little window into how the committee deliberated over these numbers, if folks would find that helpful, but I don't want to like create unnecessary length to the meeting if we don't think that would be helpful.
I think a little talk will give the continuity of what our responsibility is and why we're the ones that put out the number.
Okay, sure.
And I find it helpful when the town and the school explain how they, gather their information to present this. And so that's kind of our version.
Okay. Are folks happy with me taking a stab or taking a lead on that? Okay. Then yes, Neil, I will do a small introduction, I guess.
Krista, one thing I
Okay.
might suggest is, consider taking the top part of this and putting that into a slide. Because that's really the budget committee's full look.
Right.
And that gets at the total tax rate impacts. And then I think it would be worth just you taking a minute or two to just say what each of these sections actually is. Since we're going to hand it out, I think it's going to take some people a little time to digest it. If you gave a 2-minute overview of what each section is trying to tell them, I think it would make more people be able to understand it and use the information.
I can do that.
And of course, people's main question on everyone's minds is how much my taxes are gonna go up.
Right.
Just a quick mention of the $200,000, $400,000, $600,000 properties.
Okay,
That could be on the slide too.
I can do that. Speaking to that, I believe there's usually a small write-up that the budget committee does that gets entered into the report. Were you going to bring that?
That's on my list.
Okay.
Kara said, remind them that they have not turned in their annual report yet.
Yes, I was not clear to me. So thank you for bringing that up. And I saw that, I saw those reminder emails come across. And so it was on my list as well, Neil. Do we normally do that before our hearing? Because
Think
we will not have voted
often,
on.
but you could do it after the hearing
I thought Karen's due date was like the end of the week or
Pretty
something.
quick after. If you did it by the 14th, by the
Okay,
end of the day on the 14th, we'd be fine. But that's
okay,
pretty much it.
okay. And in last year, who did you do it, Rich? I think so. I thought maybe 2 years ago you did it. Do you remember who did it last year, Mark?
The write-up,
The write-up, yeah. Was it you?
no, it was Jonathan.
It was Jonathan.
Yeah,
Okay,
so, I mean, I can send you what I did for a few years and send to Jonathan that I think he adapted. if you want.
adapted, yeah.
Um,
Do you mind doing
Yeah.
that for me?
sure.
Then, I'm happy to do it for the committee, or I'm happy to have someone volunteer to take a stab at it if anyone's feeling like they want to. Okay, I'll do it.
The prerogative of the chair,
That's fine. Yeah, I'll do it.
one of the perks.
Is this going to be in the town report or maybe as a separate handout?
This would be a separate handout.
Okay,
Yeah,
because I agree with what Mark said, that especially the top section of this is sort of a representation of what we do here, right? Because we're supposed to be the ones who understand all different facets of the taxes. So I agree. I think, you know, obviously, if you're doing a write-up that's in the report and this is not in the report, that maybe you shouldn't necessarily reference specific lines on this, but I agree that this was at least in terms of your presentation at the public hearing, this would be a great thing to model your presentation around, is that, you know, all our work led to this point.
I agree.
We also have to get our MS sheets available for the hearing, which I'm sure the town does, I'm sure the school does, but you know, we have to do ours too,
Yep.
because there's a signature.
Yes.
that happens.
Yes.
So I'm gonna suggest for the first time ever, because of the level of discourse that's going around in the community, that not to draw things out, but at the beginning of the hearing, that every budget member of the budget committee introduce themselves, very brief background on how they ended up on the budget committee, I think would be helpful for the community to humanize the faces that are sitting up here. And if you want to shoot it down, say that's not a good idea, but that, I think that would be very helpful to everybody.
I'm fine with the idea, but I'd leave it open to the committee. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, so. Anyone? The only question, Steve, that I kind of have on how you ended up on the committee, is there more you're looking for from most of us other than like, I care about the town and got interested and
Yeah.
someone called me one day and said,
Yeah.
have you thought about being on the budget committee?
Sure. What's your background or whatever, what
Sure.
got you interested in the budget committee?
Yeah, okay.
I'm wondering if we're concerned about the time for presentations. We could spend 20 minutes just talking about that.
I would ask everybody to keep it to like 30 seconds.
Mhm.
Like, we're not looking for a 5-minute background of every job that everyone on the budget committee has had. Is that fair? Okay. Any other discussion of the hearing? Okay, typically we start at 6 o'clock. And in recent years, we've had it here, although I know that,
It is here at 6 o'clock.
yes, okay.
Is that because of the sound system?
It is.
Okay.
So just not to belabor this, but typically we start at 5:30. We're starting at 6. We will do quick intros. I will run through a budget committee primer, so to speak, and then we'll hand it off to the individuals. Do we want to take in a particular order?
I'll go first.
Okay. So we'll do town I think it makes sense to do town school precincts. We'll do town school, Kentucky, Hopkinton. That sounds okay. All right. Any other format issues for the hearing that we have to clear up, Neil?
Should do it.
All
Are you
right.
gonna do public comment between each one or at the end?
I think we should
it's
do
best
each
to do it
one.
each one.
Yeah. As we have been doing on the committee.
Yeah.
I didn't hear what you said.
We'll do public comment
On each
after
one?
each one, yeah.
Good.
And we typically vote after each one. We don't like do all of them at the end, as I recall.
You typically
vote
end the
again.
public hearing and then start a meeting of the budget committee
Yeah.
where you actually vote. So that's
So
kind
is
of
that-
after
We
the
do?
public
Okay.
hearing.
Thanks for the reminder.
And I have to sign a
Okay.
bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Okay. All right. Great.
I will be here next week. Okay. Slight change of plan.
That's good news. Before we close, like, I just wanted to make two comments. One, I also wanted to thank Mark and Debbie for their time on the committee. Debbie has been a wonderful vice chair this year. Thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege to beside you. And Mark, you left big shoes when you stepped down as chair 2 years ago. I think that I certainly will say that I still look to you as a leader on this committee for your years of experience. And the time that you devoted to this town, unpaid, both in person or on Zoom, so to speak, but also I'm sure the time that you spent thinking about the budgets, agonizing over decisions, the stress that sometimes brings, because they're weighty things to consider, is very much appreciated. And for you as well, Debbie, obviously. And this committee will miss you both. I think I'll speak for myself and the committee, but thank you.
Thanks, Krista.
On a related note to the kind of thank you to the public service from both Mark and Debbie, something that has just been on my mind lately, and of course, due to like the recent news cycles, is just the fact that what we do in this room like really matters. I think, and I want to say thank you to like everyone actually just for serving this year, because in many ways, to me personally, I will speak personally, not as the chairwoman, but there is an air of devaluing public service, I think, and the role that normal people play in government. And in many ways, at a time where like the federal government is pulling back education funds, possibly, and the state has pulled back education funds. I certainly have felt the weight of like, well, the buck stops here. Like, it's well and good for those two entities to say we're gonna push it back to the municipalities, but like we are the municipality. Like literally, if we choose not to fund something, it's not like somebody else is gonna pick it up. It just doesn't get funded. And so like we're in many ways like I think we wake up and we're like these individual people in this relatively tiny town, and yet like that's where the rubber hits the road in terms of how dollars get spent and like things actually work around here. So I just have been reflecting on that lately, and I don't think it's important, like I didn't think it was totally appropriate to make this little spiel at the public hearing next week, but I wanted to say thank you to everyone this year, and everyone who attended as well, to be honest, because it's just been an honor to serve in the role, and I wanted to just voice a note of appreciation of that.
Right back at you.
Thank you, Krista.
So,
And
okay.
I move we push it on West Hopkins.
Oh.
All right.
Any other business, or can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.